is Grayson Helcher, and this is my final project for Theater Research 2270. The topics we discussed in this assignment will be the topic of research that I have chosen, where this research would be shared, the budget to complete my work and the restrictions that come along with it, those would be both digital and physical, my 12-week plan on how I would write a research paper, and why my topic is important to theater research. My topic of research was originally the usage of animals as symbolism in Shakespeare's plays/writings. My love for animals made me want to see how they are mentioned and referred to in Shakespeare's work, and I additionally wanted to see how his references matched up to how those animals are really like. Like, for example, when someone will reference a bat to having bad vision when bats actually have excellent vision. As I was doing my research for the journal article report, I stumbled upon an article by Laurie Shannon titled The 8 Animals in Shakespeare, or Before the Human. In her writing, a main point she brought up was how the word animal was hardly used as it wasn't a part of the common English language back then. Animals were not yet grouped into the same category until nearing the end of Shakespeare's works, and were referred to as beasts, fowl, or fish, depending on their species. From this article, my topic of research turned into how language changed over time in Shakespeare's works. Research is important because it's educational. So in this section, we're going to be looking at places in which it can be taught. I'll be discussing later in this presentation the areas and ways in which Shakespeare's development of language over time is important to theater research. So I will not be talking about in this section how it is important to theater classes, as I would like to be able to fully dive into theater spaces as a whole in that section. This section will focus on non-theater oriented areas in which this research could be shared. English classes. Shakespeare is an already heavily discussed topic in high school English classes. His work is thoroughly studied, and his language, New English, which I learned through the journal article report because I called it Old English, is learned. But the ways in which his English has changed seems to be a topic under-addressed. The ways in which language changes can be an important part of English class, and as language is a forever changing aspect of life. Understanding the history of words can help with understanding different eras of writing, as language choice is important. Words that may be formal today could have been informal when they were first used. Knowing the ways in which English has changed can help with interpreting works from different eras. Many English assignments center on interpretations of works, and knowing the history of the English language can create a more diverse understanding. Studying the way English changed over time can also share how life was like at a certain time. This research could be important for history classes, as language reflected what was important and meaningful at that time. For example, during Shakespeare's time, language was often derived from the passages in the Bible. And now today, social media is the main driving force the ways in which our language is spoken. This is evident in listening to Gen Alpha use words such as sigma, skibbity, and based. ESL classes, or learning English classes. The ways in which English is an ever-changing language can be beneficial to those who are learning English. As previously mentioned, language is ever-changing, and English will change as they are learning it. Using Shakespeare's life to show how drastically English has changed over his lifespan can give them a base to think about how fast it will change in their life as well. Additionally, explaining why the language in his work changed over time can help them to anticipate how it will change in the future to give them an easier time adapting to the changing language. Writing a research paper not only takes time, but it also takes money. In this section, we'll be looking at my budget and the things that I can and I can't do. Being a student who has to pay rent and only has a part-time minimum wage job, money is very tight and hard to come by. Each week after expenses, I only have about $50 per week of free-to-use money. My only choice right now to get money to do research will be to save up my free-to-use money. If I were to save up for a whole year with $50 times 4 weeks times 12 months, I would only have $2,400 worth saved up. This would keep my budget very tight. I could possibly reach out to sponsors and fundraisers to see if I could receive help. Some things I wouldn't be able to do with my budget would be travel by plane, as the plane tickets would cost more than what I have saved up. Travel by car, as I do not own a car and my budget is not enough to purchase a car. I also do not have a driver's license. This would mean any archives that I am not personally near would not be possible to access in person. Buying excessive online materials. Online materials would be where most of my budget goes, but with some materials being hundreds of dollars to access, I would have to choose which ones I need wisely. Solutions to my issues. Even though I am unable to travel by plane or by car, I can still travel by bus within Canada. Although these buses are expensive, they are still cheaper than plane tickets. Some of the buses I can take would be city buses if traveling around Guelph or my hometown of Hamilton, the GO bus, which reaches from one end of southern Ontario to the other, and a Greyhound, which can reach to outside the province, along with the other sides of the province as well. With outside of Canada travel, I can make friends with researchers from other countries that may be able to go to archives for me. With social media being a mostly worldwide device, I can try to reach out to researchers on there. Even though there are plenty of expensive online materials, I can possibly save money by seeing if these high paywall items are free to access in any libraries that are near my potential researcher friends and see if they can check them out for me as well. There are also plenty of free or cheap online documents that are still peer-reviewed and are full of substance. It is important that these items do not go underlooked. I am also a University of Guelph student, meaning that for many resources, I can reach out to my library and they can help me find them as well. Writing a research paper takes time, and it is not something you can do overnight. For this assignment, I'll be giving myself a 12-week schedule. Week 1 to 2 will be figuring out where the researchers are and budgeting them. Week 3 would be reaching out to researchers who help I would need. Week 4 to 6 would be research gathering. Week 6 to 10 would be the writing process. Week 11 would be the editing phase. And week 12 would be focusing on trying to find a publisher. Weeks 1 to 2 would be figuring out where the researchers are and how to budget. I would need to look to see what resources I would need and where they are and how much they cost. Some resources I have already found are on archive.org, which was mentioned and discussed in the Archive Report project. For the journal article report, I reached out to the University of Guelph to help me with accessing some materials. Places like online archives and universities would be a good starting point to look at. I would also need to investigate some places I would want to travel to. For example, I would want to go see Shakespeare's hometown in Scotland. I would also need to investigate how much materials I need would be. Due to my project being a history project, more so than a current day theater project, I am unable to conduct interviews with audiences. So this is why the majority of my information will be coming from archives and archive materials. Week 3. During week 3, I would need to reach out to any researchers who help I need or would be interested in. For example, I would need to reach out to researchers who live in Scotland near where Shakespeare lived to see if they'd be able to travel there for me. I would reach out to these researchers and find them through social media. Some sites I believe would be useful would be Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, or X, previously known as Twitter. Week 4 to 6. Week 4 to 6 will be research gathering. Now that I have been able to reach all my research that I needed/wanted, I am now needing to gather the information from those resources. Many resources will have important and useless information depending on what your research topic is. Over these 2 weeks, I'll be weeding out the information that is unimportant and highlighting the information that is important. This would have to take place over several weeks due to relying on other researchers to help with gathering of resources. Week 6 to 10 will be the writing process. This month we dedicated to writing the paper. I have given myself a month to write this paper as it is not something that can be done overnight. The stages of writing my paper will be done through jot notes, and then deciding what paragraph says what, then doing the rough copy of the paper, and finally revising. I would give 1 week to the first step, 2 weeks to the second, and finally 1 week to the last. Week 11 would be the editing phase. I would bring in published authors and researchers to edit my work. It is important to bring in editors, as it not only helps with grammar and word structure, but also helps to make sure your work is unbiased and non-derogatory. There is hidden biases embedded within each person due to life experiences, and so I would make sure my editors are from all different backgrounds and levels of formal education to riddle out any hidden biases. Week 12 would focus on trying to find a publisher, or more so, starting to try to find a publisher. Some important publishers for Shakespeare theater research are Hopkins Press, Shakespeare's Globe, and Gister. I would also ask my fellow published researchers about publishers that may not be known but still offer great opportunities and contact them as well. I'll contact these publishers through emails and phone calls to set up meetings to possibly discuss publishing my work. One of the most important questions you should ask yourself before starting a research project would be, why is it important? And who is it important to? This section I'll be discussing why my topic is important to theater research. I believe learning about how Shakespeare's language has changed over time is important to theater research to be able to study ways in which theater has changed. We can't talk about how theater has changed over the years without mentioning William Shakespeare. They had a huge influence on theater, and their masterworks are still staged at the Blackpool Grand Theatre today. Blackpool Grand Theatre in 2022. In theater research, we often look at the history of costumes, theaters, and scripts. Shakespeare is a major theater influence, as previously stated by Blackpool Grand Theatre, with his shows having been performed for hundreds of years. Often we use Shakespeare's work to look at the past to compare to current day to his time. But we often lose how fast theater in English has changed, since most of us have a hard time understanding how long it has been since Shakespeare died. We often feel, though, it is longer than it has been. Being able to study how theater changed over a lifespan instead of centuries puts it into perspective. It can be an amazing reference to reflect on when comparing the changes from old and modern day theater. Additionally, Shakespeare has also changed the English language by establishing unfamiliar words. For example, Shakespeare invented the word birthplace. He has also created phrases such as breaking the ice. The Oxford English Dictionary credits William Shakespeare with the first use citations of approximately 1,600 words, from bedazzle to fashionable to watchdog, more than any other writer. The master of wordplay also contributed dozens of other phrases that remain a part of their everyday language. In some cases, Shakespeare may have coined terms, and others he may have been the first to put them into a written record. Klein, 2024. With Shakespeare being an important factor on how English as a language has changed, it is also important to view how the changing language impacted old audiences. We oftentimes underplay how important language is to theater, when words are in the way in which some shows can get their messages across. With words such as birthplace being common use today, it covers up how the audiences originally felt about the words being said as they were new to them. Previously, we mentioned how strange the slang words of Gen Alpha sounds to us, and the confusion it creates when we hear these words being used in a sentence. Since the original audience of Shakespeare's works are long dead, it is impossible to interview them to see how they may have felt about some of the words Shakespeare invented and how they impacted them. Being able to look back on how language has changed creates a new way for us to discuss and interpret how impactful certain words were, and acts as a type of cheat code to see how his works and words may have been received. My sources in this assignment came from Shannon Laurie, Howard A., and WordPress. I would also like to acknowledge Hopkins Press, Shakespeare's Globe, Gister, Peter Colling, and the University of Guelph, as they were acknowledged in this assignment.